Welcome back, welcome back. This week, Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad reached out to Barack Obama, saying that if he was re-elected in 2 weeks' time, he wanted a face-to-face meeting with the US President. But will Mr Ahmadinejad win a second term in office? Or is there a possibility that we might see a new Iranian president? To discuss Iran's upcoming elections, I'm joined once again by Nazanin Ansari. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Actually, it could be two votes, couldn't it?
Yes, there's always the first round, and the top two candidates go to the second. If there's no one that gets the majority, the top two go to the second round.
Right. And what are Mr Ahmadinejad's chances, in a sense? I mean, is he a cert, or is it possible? Could he lose?
Well, definitely his chances are very good, in the sense that he has the support of the principalist factions within the parliament. He has the support of some of the top leaders of the Revolutionary Guards. He has a record that he talks about of being able to stand up to the West, and for the West having not been able to do anything, for Iran's popularity and his popularity to be on the surge in the Middle East, in the Arab world, on the Arab street. He is banking on that, and he also, the image that he projects is an image of a simple man, a man of the people, and he is giving out a lot of money for help, free cash to those in need. So definitely he is working hard to be able to win.
But the main opponent from a sort of vaguely reformist point of view is in fact Mr Karoubi, isn't it?
Yes, there are two. The real reformist, you can say, is Mr Karoubi, in the sense that most of the reformists that set up the reform movement are behind Mr Karoubi.
And what sort of election is it going to be? I mean, will it be a free and fair election, as people say in other contexts, or will it be rigged?
Definitely, in the past, what we have seen, according to the past record, it's neither been free or fair. I mean, just to have all these candidates, four main candidates, it's the Guardian Council that chooses who can run in the elections. No women candidates were allowed to take part in the elections. But having said that, there is Mr. Mir Hossein Mousavi, who was a former Prime Minister when Mr. Khamenei was president. He has a very big campaign machinery. And Mr. Khatami is actually supporting Mr. Mousavi. He is promoting
He's very much a leading moderate, yeah.
He's not a leading, he is projecting that image of being a leading moderate, but at the same time, he is one, he goes back, his roots go back to the Islamic Revolution, and he has always said that I want to stay within the confines of the Constitution and the Islamic Revolution, but he is banking on the vote from the women. And his wife, Mrs. Rahnavard, who was the chancellor of the only female university in Iran, is very popular, and they're hoping that because of Mrs. Rahnavard's popularity, women will rush to his vote, and 50% of Iranian population is made up of women.
That figures, that absolutely figures. Do you think if it was someone other than Mr. Ahmadinejad, that in fact they would go to meet with, if the president wanted to, meet with Obama? Or is that just Ahmadinejad's idea?
All four candidates have made pronunciations to the effect that it is time for Iran to end this isolation. I'm saying four because Mr. Ahmadinejad has also said that he is willing to meet Mr. Obama and debate him at the UN. When he's meeting with Mr. Obama, he wants to debate Mr. Obama. And, of course, most of the other three, except Mr. Ahmadinejad, are saying that it is time for Iran to end this isolation.
But the important point also to realise is that in fact it's the supreme leader, as it were, who makes the policy in the Supreme Council. And in fact, although he's the famous person, he's not the powerful person in Iran. The president.
The president does not have any control over the foreign policy and major decisions. It is the supreme leader, the Wali Faqih, who according to the constitution is in charge of foreign policy, is in charge of the armed forces, and is in charge of the major decision making. And hukm hukumati is that he rules by direct rule.
By direct rule. So that there's a limit to what even a new president could do to change things. Thank you very much for being with us again, Nazanin. Much appreciated. At the beginning of this year, democracy returned to Bangladesh. After almost 2 years under a caretaker government, the former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina returned to power with a large majority. But the problems facing Bangladesh are, of course, still enormous. It's a country of 150 million, corruption is endemic, extremist violence is common, and much of the land will flood if and when global warming causes sea levels to rise. Earlier I spoke to Bangladesh's new foreign minister, Dr. Dipu Moni. She was keen to tell me, naturally enough, about the success of those recent elections.
In that region, a country that is Muslim majority country, the decisive victory with 3/4 majority of a secular force, that's a huge achievement, and that speaks for the people of the country, how they see religion, how they see extremism, how they see democracy. So that is a great achievement, and before we talk about any problems, we must acknowledge that achievement. And we must also acknowledge another achievement, that in a country that is so small in terms of land, but with such a huge population, 150 million, we are able to feed our own people. So that's a great achievement as well. And that our democracy has always encountered problems on its way. And we had many setbacks, but still people kept aspiring for democracy, kept struggling for democracy, and they have established democracy. And that is an achievement. And in a country where we have so little, the per capita income is only about 500 plus US dollars, and yet it is I think in some UK survey, they say that it appears high up on the list on the happiness index. Wow. So people are so happy with so little.
Where would you most like to make progress then?
Well, in combating corruption, in combating terrorism as well. There is, I mean, all these crises, the economic crisis, the global economic crisis, we are still holding up, and we are trying our best, but there are problems, and also there are problems with the climate change. There are so many issues, and with the people,
what particularly with the climate change in Bangladesh? With
climate change, it's predicted that Bangladesh is going to be one of the worst affected countries in the world due to climate change. There will be a rise of the sea level, and also with the melting ice from the Himalayas, will be in a very tight spot. And we have such a huge population, and the density is so great.
But you wouldn't, it wouldn't go to the stage where you would have to do what the Maldives are doing, would it? I mean, and move. Moving 150 million people, would it?
But what we want, Sir David, is that there is a conference coming up in Copenhagen, and we want to see certain things. Firstly, we want deeper cuts in greenhouse gas emissions. That's number one. Number two, we want funding that has to be predictable and adequate. Thirdly, we want technology to cope with the effects of climate change for the adaptation programs, and that technology has to be affordable as well as eco-friendly. And fourthly, we would like the world to be aware that because of climate change, not only from Bangladesh but from many other countries like our country, there will be a huge number of environmental refugees. The world must start thinking about it, how to deal with that problem. So climate change is not just some figures and some statistics and not some faraway thing. It is coming.
Wow.
The effects are being felt already with the more frequency and severity of floods, cyclones. So world has to think and has to think together to cope with the changes.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Dipu Moni there, talking to me earlier. In a minute, Roger Moore.